Hi guys, I want to share with you two new policies and procedures. I would like your feedback.
Sure.
Have you had a chance to read the policies and the
Yes,
procedures?
we have.
Yes.
So the first policy, behaviors of concern, is to help us better manage situations where physical safety is in danger. Have you ever been in such a
Yes,
situation?
I have.
So what do you do?
Like, I stood there with a client yelling, threatening me and other people, and I let him calm down. And after a few minutes, he seemed to be okay. Did I do the right thing?
Yes, you're doing good. So the policy offers guidance on what you might do.
Can I go through that?
Sure.
The first bit says, ensure the immediate safety of all concerned. How do we do that?
So that depends on the situation. You might, for example, remove everyone from the situation, or you might try and diffuse the situation. Maybe, for example, the resident has a care worker who understands him, or the person's care plan might anticipate this occurrence, so settling the situation might be easier than the first set.
Yeah, I remember a bloke who used to put on these terrible temper tantrums until we figured out it was only when his visitor was late. So we told him, we could then tell him if his visitor was going to be late, and the temper tantrum stopped.
So it depends on the person and
Yeah,
the situation.
Yeah.
So the important point is that the policy adopts a restraint-free care. This is the core of the policy.
So restraint there means, according to the definition in the policy and procedures here, any aversive practice, device or action that interferes with a resident's ability to make a decision or which restricts their freedom.
Yeah, and HEC home care doesn't use a restraint.
But what if someone is about to crash a chair over the head of a resident?
So in that case, look at the point 5 and 6. Your example could fit the definition of the urgent situation. The definition is where the person's behavior presents a risk of harm to themselves or others, or a risk of serious damage to properties. So in this case, the person may be restrained without consent. The procedure outlines the relevant laws, but generally the laws makes it clear that restraint can only be used as a last resort.
It sounds like we have to be lawyers as well as care workers.
So we do need to be aware of the requirements of the law before using any forms of restraint. For example, restraint, except urgent restraint, requires appropriate authorization. It's not our role to make the decision. Always contact your supervisor. So let's sum up. The first, when we encounter behaviors of concern, we adopt restraint-free care. The second, the detail is in the procedures, including reporting requirements. We care workers do not make the decision to employ restraint. The third, and remember that situations involving behaviors of concern can become talking points inside and outside.
Okay.
So we should not talk about this situation unless you talk with your supervisor.
Mm.
So now let's move on to the second point. This is an additional consideration for working in remote communities, tuberculosis and homeless dogs. The purpose of these policies is to minimize workers acquiring infections in remote places. First, tuberculosis. The policy points out that 90% of cases are latent and do not spread the disease. The other 10% are serious. So 98% of these recover. However, of the people who go untreated, half die. So the disease is caused by a bacterium and is spread by coughing, speaking, and sneezing.
So Shu, is that why PPE is so important?
Yes, that's very important.
Can you demonstrate that for us, the PPE?
Yes, I can show you guys. First, we wash hands.
And that has to be very thorough, doesn't it?
Yes.
Not just 10 seconds under a tap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mask.
Masks. Sometimes goggles.
Okay.
I like that mask.
Yeah.
Last one.
Hmm.
See?
Okay.
Right. So what happens to the equipment
Uh,
after you finish with it?
after use, we just put in yellow bin.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Now let us return to the procedure and the immediate response. Point 1 tells us to contact our supervisor. Do not start the program until your supervisor tells you to. The supervisor will contact the health department for direction. So point 4 is very important. It's not the care worker's role to conduct inquiries into the matter. So that is the role of the health department. Meanwhile, maintain client confidentiality, taking into consideration the reporting obligations in law outlined in the procedures.
What would you tell the client in that situation?
Be honest. Simply say that a potential infection issue means you must await direction from your supervisor. Reassure that the services will be provided in a safe way.
So this is all about infection control.
Yes. So I encourage you to read the reference materials and attend any update to update courses in infection control.
Mhm.
So, any questions? So let's move to the homeless dogs. Have either of you visited a remote community where there are homeless dogs?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, and there were homeless dogs there, and I stayed away from those
Oh.
dogs, and they stayed away from me.
Oh, well done, John. So you followed the first rule.
I did.
Avoid contact.
But what if the dog comes into the yard or even inside the house?
Yeah.
It's not the role of the care worker to manage the homeless dogs. The point 2 of the procedure stresses the importance of good hygiene, including hand washing. Most of the disease caused from dogs,
Okay.
gastrointestinal infections.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Hand washing is very important.
Yeah. Well, I was really pleasantly surprised to learn about that organisation, AMRIC, because it's an organisation set up to improve the interaction between dogs and people, especially from the point of view of their health and that, in remote Indigenous communities. And so we could perhaps, if we were in a situation like that, we could perhaps suggest to the elders, if they would like, to contact that organisation. That organisation might be able to help them.
It's handy to know, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So the dogs could give us worms, is that about it?
Not quite, but there are 1 or 2 serious infections like tapeworm, which we still need to be aware of. But with good infection control practices, we should minimize these risks. So our time is up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shu, for an
Very good.
informative session.
Yes.